Hello, my name is Nick Gillespie. My unique name is Knickknack, Nicknack. This is my Social Work 681, Section 1, Assignment 4, Global Passport Book and Response Essay audio project. I want to start by talking about the thesis that I have, which I wrote down. It's less of a research thesis and more of a reflective thesis, we'll say. It says, in a time when America is shifting toward a non-equitable society, and in a time when I will spend the majority of the next administration in Africa, it is more vital than ever that I uphold to the principles of cultural humility we talked about in this class, and perhaps do a lot more listening than talking. The three events that I went to were the Chinese New Year event at the Ann Arbor Public Library. I also went to the Global Social Work Dinner, which was on February 17th. And then I went to a Peace Corps informational meeting. The Peace Corps is what I'm going to spend the majority of this time talking about. I'm going to do the Peace Corps in June of 2025, so just a few months from now, and I will spend 27 months, so from June 2025 to August 2027, in Eswatini, the new name for Swaziland, and I will be working with kids and helping them maintain sexual health and increase academic education and work on counseling, and I'll be partnered with the medical team as well to help assess their medical needs. I selected all of the events that I went to fairly intentionally so that I could practice listening and integrating myself into a community that is not mine as a white man. These events are essential to outlining the course themes, as I will talk about in just a moment. So I spent a lot of time looking at the different things that we've talked about in this class so far and found a comprehensive set of articles and information to think about and consider regarding how I should approach going into the Peace Corps. And so that's kind of what we're going to talk about today, and that's the setup that I have at this moment in time. Just because it's on my mind, I am going into the Peace Corps very soon, and there are a lot of logistical things to get done, and this class has been really informational and important for me in figuring out how I should approach the first few months that I'm in the Peace Corps. So one thing that I want to start with is talking about the current administration and how they are affecting the Peace Corps. At the beginning of this class, we watched a video of I forgot the name of the individual. It was in a church, and the person in the church was giving a testimony to the president, explaining, pleading perhaps to have mercy to the more marginalized individuals of the United States and even the world. She talked about having mercy to the transgender community, the bisexual community, the LGBTQ community, people of color, immigrants, all of that stuff. And I want to extend that to the marginalized population of the world, the global south, and especially in response to reducing or taking away U.S. aid and how that affects the Peace Corps. Obviously, that affects the Peace Corps a lot. It does not completely defund the Peace Corps, thankfully. The Peace Corps is mostly funded independently of federal funding, believe it or not. And that being said, a lot of what the Peace Corps does is defunded. So while I'll still be in Africa, actively at this moment, the curriculum is being changed for how to approach teaching HIV prevention and how to approach teaching sexual health. There are things that we can and cannot say, and that is proving to be extremely and radically relevant to the content that we're talking about in this class. And that kind of moves me on to this next concept of how... let me organize my thoughts here. So just last week, we talked about an article entitled The Revolution and Decolonization of Social Work Ethics, the Global Social Work Statement. That article, one of the biggest takeaways from that article is that social workers, if they're going to be international and global, need to move away from this like Western liberal humanistic view of the world and move toward just kind of the world's perspective on social work and how to meet the needs of cultures. And even, there's no like international view of social work. There's like the view that each culture has of social work. So when I'm in Eswatini and I'm doing things that pertain directly to a social work profession, I won't be using an international quote unquote mindset. I'll be trying to match the work that I'm doing as closely as possible to the community that I'm in. And so that's kind of this level of cultural humility that this paper calls for, is to meet the needs of the community in a way that kind of has nothing to do with how I would meet the needs of my own community at home in the U.S. And that's something as well that our current administration is kind of misaligned with at the moment, is that there's this like America First ideology at the moment that I mean, obviously is not even helpful to other countries, but even if we were trying to be helpful, I think it's safe to say that we would approach it from an American perspective, and that would remain unhelpful to a country like Eswatini that just has different needs, different resources, different priorities, etc. And so this article kind of really gives a solid perspective on how to enter Eswatini when I do the Peace Corps in June from a more cultural perspective, let's say. And so that kind of brings me to another article that we talked about last week entitled The Globalization of Consciousness and New Challenges for International Social Work. And I wanted to pull a quote from that article that goes, "One of the fundamental challenges of international social work, then, is to promote democratic ideals and to contribute to the development of policies and programs that aim to integrate the world's cultures." So this is an interesting one. This can be interpreted multiple ways. On the one hand, this can be interpreted exactly how I just described, which is that I need to go to the country of Eswatini and think about what their needs are and their resources and adapt to those and work on policies and programs that meet those needs, and really have this like metaphysical perspective of like, okay, what is the impact that I'm having in this country when I'm there, right? And is it too American, quote unquote? Is it not helpful to the community that I'm in? I need to have this like level of self-awareness that's going to be very difficult to maintain at times. And the other perspective that I could see here from this quote is that I would need to integrate other global perspectives into how I can help Eswatini. Right, so even though Eswatini has its own needs, its own resources, its own community, it is still part of the world, and it's part of the global south, it's part of the country of Africa, it's part of the sub-Saharan section of Africa. There's this community aspect where it's part of a group of countries, and how can the work that I do, how can that work integrate itself with the communities that surround Eswatini, and how can I sort of meet resource needs that adapt to or maybe pull from policies that are in other countries. And so there's this balance and this dichotomy between zooming in really closely to the countries, the communities, even like just the villages or the population's needs that I'm working with in that moment. But then the other side of that dichotomy is it's part of the world, and there's this global aspect of like, okay, well, a lot of different kinds of people are coming together, and that's sort of the whole point of the Peace Corps. And so how can I effectively make a difference that kind of reaches, that meets both the needs of that dichotomy. And so that was just an interesting quote to pull. Another article that I want to talk about is entitled "The West and the Rest Divide: Human Rights, Culture, and Social Work." And so one quote that I pulled from this article is, "Social workers must harness the contradictory and competing strands of their histories, traditions, and values, and the multiple identities within their contexts to develop vibrant, locally specific social work education, research, and practices." And so this kind of just says the same thing that I've been talking about, is I need to approach the situation with cultural humility. And this is something that I wrestle with a lot. I don't wrestle with it. I have to be very mindful of it, we'll say. I need to approach the Peace Corps service with cultural humility, and I need to be listening a lot more than I need to be talking, which is kind of the original thought of my thesis there, is that for a long time while I'm there, for the first maybe 5-6 months out of the 27, I'm going to be sitting and listening to the community's needs, without really acting. And I think the importance of that is I don't know the community I'm going into. It's kind of like our case study from class of the social worker that ends up in Zambia doing something similar to what I'm describing, is like they don't know what that community is and what their needs are and what they're like, and even the disparities and the marginalizations within that community, is like who is considered prosperous and who's considered marginalized, and how do I meet both of their needs at the same time? These are all questions that I can only answer by sitting and listening, and perhaps asking a lot of questions without coming to any conclusions, without coming to any judgments, only by merely wondering and being curious am I able to kind of understand that information. And so with something like the Peace Corps, the stakes are that much higher, which is I'm sort of representing the United States, especially at a time where the United States maybe does not have a very good representation with communities that rely on its U.S. foreign aid. So I'm like a white man American going into a country that has long depended on America, and I represent the country that is failing them, and there's this like, okay, the odds are against me. I have this steep uphill battle that I need to take in order to help the community, and so this is something that I kind of have an existential crisis over, is like, how can I do this most effectively? And the class materials that we're learning about do play a role and do a justice in helping me kind of recenter my thoughts and understand how I can best serve the community. That was a very long-winded way of saying I have a lot to do. I have a lot of listening to do, and I'm hoping that I can successfully and properly do it. So there's something that I want to end with which is kind of what our class started with, which is the definition of international social work as it reads now. And I'm going to read that for us. Social work is a practice-based profession and an academic discipline that promotes social change and development, social cohesion, and the empowerment and liberation of people. Principles of social justice, human rights, collective responsibility, and respect for diversities are central to social work. Underpinned by theories of social work, social services, humanities, indigenous knowledges, social work engages people and structures to address life challenges and enhance well-being. The above definition may be amplified at national and/or regional levels. So I like to go back to this, especially because it has another dichotomy, which is that social work is a practice-based profession and also an academic discipline. So in this way, it's kind of like biology, where you can practice it as maybe a doctor, or you can research it as a molecular biologist. And so social work in this moment is one where you can research it as if you were on like, for example, I'm on the TIPS school student trauma team at the University of Michigan doing research. But then also I'm about to do the Peace Corps, which is not research. It's very active and in the field. And so that dichotomy is really interesting here, right? Is like there's two things that I could be doing and two different directions I could take with this work, and especially me just kind of going off on a tangent here. I've gone in both directions, and in Africa it'll be really an interesting and educational experience to be able to kind of mix the two. And perhaps I won't be doing a lot of research, but this whole evidence-based practice and practice-based evidence comes into play, where, like, sure, I'll do my best to use evidence-based learning techniques to best produce information that people in Africa, especially kids, and even when there's a language barrier, can possibly learn, but then also I'll be learning how to work with kids in Africa, which I've never done before. And I'll come back with a lot to say on how to do that maybe isn't research-based, but is definitely practice-based. And so this current definition kind of serves both worlds and both sub-disciplines under the major discipline there. And it's a running theme that I'll use while I'm in the Peace Corps. So that was a lot of things to cover, and I kind of just want to go over them conclusively, is that so I went to 3 events, the Chinese New Year at the Ann Arbor Public Library, the Global Social Work Dinner, and the Peace Corps Informational Meeting. The Chinese New Year at the Public Library was really important because it gave me a chance to integrate with a culture that I have nothing to do with, right? So it wasn't something related to Africa, but it was a culture that was different from mine that I didn't know a lot about, and my goal was to sit there and kind of learn by listening, learn by osmosis, right? And the Global Social Work Dinner is kind of a similar version of that, where you have all these different people from all these different communities with these different thoughts that are in one place. And my goal with that dinner as well was to do a lot more listening than talking. And that's what I'm consistently going to be practicing, is like, I need to learn about the people that I'm working with before I work with them. And sure, I can ask some questions, but I really am going to do my best not to come to any conclusions. And so that's what I wanted to spend this time in the Global Passport audio recording talking about, is maybe not quite concerns, but just some deep thoughts that I have about the Peace Corps and doing it imminently in the summer here. But so I wrote a conclusion. In conclusion, I learned that there is a lot of pressure on me to get this right, and I have a lot of listening to do if I am truly to do it the way I wish. And I think I've touched on this a lot, is that I really do have a lot of pressure on me at the moment. I'm about to spend 27 months in a foreign country, and I've never been to the entire continent. And there's going to be a lot to learn. There's going to be an uphill battle. There's going to be a learning curve. I'm going to have to learn a language, and I'm going to have to work with kids who, the population I've never really talked to. And I'm going to take every last bit of information that I can possibly get out of this class and apply it to the work that I do in the Peace Corps. And this passport event inspired me to do my best to go to more events so that I can practice this listening concept before I end up having to do it for real, where the stakes are relatively high. Thank you so much for listening. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of the things that I said. I'll be turning this in much earlier than the due date, obviously, so there will be many chances for me to edit it as necessary, but I'm going to cut myself off so that I don't go over the 20-minute timeline here. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have a great day.